This U-shaped region, located along the US Gulf Coast of the southeastern United States, is unique in that, much like the Rust Belt or Corn Belt, its geography, economy, and its troubles are more homogeneous than other parts of America. And while you could argue that places like Destin, Biloxi, and Dolphin Island are at least as ostentatious and opulent as any other well-to-do coastal communities, that isn't the full story, and they're more the exception than the rule anyway. And on the whole, the area surrounding the Gulf and the people living in it are struggling. Despite its access to the world's 9th largest body of water, with 8 of America's top fishing destinations and its 6th busiest shipping port located alongside foundational cities like Houston, New Orleans, and Tampa, all of which are growing economic hubs that offer distinct cultural influences felt well beyond the region, thanks to a distinct mixture of warm weather, rich culture, southern hospitality, sandy beaches, and historic significance, making it a little too easy to forget that the Gulf is suffering through significant inequality, poverty, pollution, and catastrophe. But why is the Gulf region so deeply embattled when it benefits from such obvious natural advantages? Well, I can tell you one thing, it isn't because of pirates. With primary industries like oil and gas, pipeline transportation, and petrol production, it's clear that the Gulf gets its economic cues from Houston, and Houston's economy runs mostly on fossil fuels. See, this area produces 20% of all American crude oil, it refines 45% of the nation's petroleum, and it exports 51% of US natural gas. That's more than 700 million barrels of crude every year. And that's how the Gulf region became so dependent on oil that its offshore area looks almost Middle Eastern, with the area driving massive economic success for companies like Shell, BP, and Exxon, but not necessarily for the coastal communities that keep the lights on. Sure, oil rig workers are paid well, but that's mostly management, while the conditions are gruelingly dangerous for laborers contending with fire, fatigue, and machine malfunction. While much of the best paying positions are specialized, and therefore filled by traveling engineers and scientists. So, while the Gulf is filled with valuable resources, the tangible benefits are limited for the people living there. Many of them competing with traveling operators for their mid-tier rig positions or stuck working in the service industry, bolstered by growth in Gulf tourism. But while benefits are limited for local communities, the consequences of vast oil production are outright unavoidable, with a lopsided economy, growing inequality, toxic contamination, thousands of abandoned wells, and numerous spills throughout the 20th century, with some scientists referring to the harm already caused there as irreparable for the coast's natural environment, especially with the devastating fallout of BP's massive Deepwater Horizon spill back in 2010, dumping nearly 134 million gallons of oil into the Gulf's waters. And while I believe it's worth further exploring how big oil has been problematic for the Gulf Coast, where waters are relatively shallow and therefore especially prone to pollution and toxic spread, the truth is that the oil industry has made itself deeply vital there, and climate concerns have been even more disastrous. That's to say, the Gulf of Mexico is the most problematic part of the most problematic ocean when it comes to devastating and destructive hurricane and tropical storm activity. That's because the Gulf is warmer than other sections of the Atlantic, as its temperature gradient sets up vortices in the air and water that can cause a significant amount of storms. And, as we saw with Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, the low-lying areas of the Gulf Coast and its aging infrastructure makes communities like these, and these, and these, some of the most vulnerable places in the entire United States. Of course, Katrina wasn't the only hurricane to cause catastrophic damage in the Gulf, displacing whole communities while causing billions of dollars in damages. No, all of these storms were more recent. It's just that Katrina really highlighted how ill-prepared the region has always been. Honestly, I would say that poverty, poor education, and falling infrastructure, along with worsening climate effects and the side effects of vast natural resources, have strained the region to a point where you could almost forget its natural advantages entirely, as far too many Gulf communities have come to be known for massive inequality, growing crime, and poor healthcare outcomes, with Business Insider reporter Jennifer Welsh arguing that the Gulf Coast was already starting to mirror third world countries way back in 2012. And it doesn't help that, while Texas and Florida have become two of America's most populous and prosperous states, the states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama have been struggling statewide, with much of their coastal areas in despair, despite them receiving a disproportionate level of state funds. As this region has taught humanity far too many harsh lessons since back before Christopher Columbus saw his first hurricane, or even before the indigenous people of America called tropical storms horrible tempests. That isn't to say that all parts of the Gulf Coast were created equally, or that they share in the same kinds of struggles. No, if you look here on the map, all of these cities are renowned for having vibrant communities, good safety, high-quality schools, and top-notch amenities. And growth is happening all across the Gulf Coast. From 2000 to 2017, it was actually the fastest-growing coastal region of the US, adding more than 3 million residents in less than 2 decades. Which makes sense because the Gulf is beautiful. It has real attractions, a handful of sizable cities with growing GMPs, unique culture, and some of the friendliest people you'll ever meet. It's just that the region's natural advantages of seemingly endless oil reserves, excellent ports, and quality shipping routes from the Mississippi River to the greater Atlantic and beyond are severely outweighed by the Gulf's natural disadvantages, with all 5 of these states being top 10 for hurricane activity, with elevated pollution levels, growing disease concerns, and a lack of local resource ownership, making the advantages there almost feel more like a curse. And yet the Gulf Coast just continues growing. I would say that there are several reasons for that, from proximity to incredible nature, to the lack of harsh winters, relatively low regional unemployment, and growing opportunities, but I would argue that it's mostly because the Gulf is so darn affordable. That's how Florida and Texas became America's first and second fastest growing states, and the Gulf Coast offers even lower prices with even more sunshine. And when you give Americans the chance to bet on themselves in an area with real affordability, they take it. Of course, growth often comes at a cost. And for a city like Seattle or Austin, that cost looks like tiny $500,000 starter homes, severe congestion, and growing social stratification. But for many of the communities along the Gulf Coast that were already suffering through deep poverty, pollution, and poor education, growth often simply looks like an even worse and more unequal version of an already impossible situation, as resource competition in an area where the median household income is less than $35,000 is just different. Especially to a place often referred to as hurricane headquarters, where regular folks can't seem to catch a break while wealthy part-time residents drive up living costs while living in the safest areas and leaving when difficulties arise. While locals are often stuck suffering through dwindling neighborhoods and the fallout of environmental disasters and climate catastrophes. Again, that isn't to say the Gulf or its growth is all bad. No, Tampa, in many ways, is outright thriving, with a metropolitan population of about 3.2 million residents. The city proper, and St. Petersburg, which sits on the peninsula surrounding it, offer dense populations, major league sports, world-class family entertainment, and bustling downtowns, while Clearwater, which sits next to St. Petersburg, is lined with some of the Gulf's most impeccable beaches. And places like South Walton, Ocean Springs, Fairhope, and Freeport are beautiful, charming communities, though cities like that come at a cost, even in the Gulf. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe. Here's another video of mine that YouTube thinks you will enjoy next.